I'm just continuing a series of videos here on food and health issues and what's going on in today's world. I'm just going to put up a whiteboard there to show you a few notes of what I'm talking about, and this is the main video I did want to talk about. The 3 previous videos I've done in this playlist, I talk about alcohol, vegetarianism and milk and breakfast cereal. That can be added to these items down here just as examples of how brainwashing, how the corporations and media create products to push on you which you don't need and that's bad for you and so forth. Milk and breakfast cereal. So that was a previous video. They're just examples that can be added down here. So I made those videos to try to make this video a bit shorter, otherwise I might go off on tangents and make this video too long. So anyway, they're all good videos to watch as well, but this is what I'm talking about here now. I'm going to talk about animal fats, okay, and salt. And then down here there's a group of things: sugar, coffee, caffeine's the drug, alcohol, and I've thrown tobacco, cigarettes and nicotine's a drug in there as a bonus. I don't really have to talk about that, but it's just an example of another product that's invented and pushed on us, virtually force-fed society. Okay, but really I started this whole concept just talking about sugar, animal fats, salt and sugar. But then I've added coffee, alcohol and cigarettes, tobacco, because they're just similar things of the same ilk, a bit different but all in the same sort of category. And milk and breakfast cereals, like I said in that previous video, could be added to it as well. So I just want to try to make my points as quickly as I can. Now, animal fats and salt, they're 2 natural foods. They're 2 natural foods that we have eaten for potentially millions of years. Humans and our ancestors for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. 2 natural foods that our body actually need. Now, having said that, you can say things in moderation. Too much of anything can kill you. If you drink too much water, you can die. Look it up, it's a fact. So, of course, if you eat nothing but fat, no good. Nothing but sugar, nothing but salt, okay, but basically putting that aside for a moment, and that's where moderation can come in. There's no moderation down there. If I don't forget, I'll talk about that. Don't fall for the moderation myth or propaganda ploy for these things, because you don't need these things. I'll talk about those in a second. So animal fats and salt are natural foods we've evolved with, developed with and built our modern civilization with. That's right, killing animals, meat, that's protein and energy, that's the fuel that's evolved us, made our brains bigger, smarter and built our modern society, and we can now sit back and think about these things and make these sorts of videos. Salt. And the thing about salt is, you may not know about this, although it has become more popular in recent times because of sports drinks and something they call electrolytes. Now, it's my theory they invented this word electrolyte because they didn't want to use the word salt, because that's what electrolytes are, salts. Now, your body needs salts. We've eaten animals when I say all our lives, for millions of years. That's the fuel. And salt, our bodies actually our body doesn't need these things. Sugar, caffeine, alcohol and tobacco, our body doesn't need those things. It doesn't need them at all. You may think you need them because they're drugs and you're hooked on it, okay? But we don't need those things. I need caffeine because I'm hooked on caffeine, I get a headache, okay? And the same thing with sugar. Sugar acts on the brain the same way that cocaine does. They're all drugs that we don't need and are all bad for you. Okay, but animal fats and salt, the 2 natural foods, okay? For salts, what they call electrolytes, sodium is the most important. There's potassium in the blood, which your heart needs. Your body needs that stuff. You may not know it, but your body needs salt. How about that? You think you need sugar, caffeine, alcohol and cigarettes? No. They're drug. You need them because you're hooked on it in the brain, but you don't need those things. They're all bad for you. Salt, too much of anything's no good, okay? If you're pouring salt all over it, okay, but basically our bodies need salt. Our cells need salt for metabolism. And the thing is, with salt, is that kidneys can expel excess salt quite easily. In fact, kidneys can expel salt much easier than if you're lacking salt and your kidneys are struggling to retain salt. It's much easier to get rid of excess salt than it is to retain salt. Your kidneys thank you if you eat too much salt. If you exercise and sweat, you're going to lose salt anyway, so it's very difficult to overdose. Of course, if you lead a sedentary lifestyle and don't exercise and get fat off all these things and fats and sugars and so forth, and then put too much salt on your food, yeah, that might cause a few problems. But apart from that, there are two things that we need and we've had for millions of years. Now, as I said, I didn't finish the point on sports drinks, because when you sweat, you need to replace those electrolytes, which are basically salts. Otherwise, hyponemia is low sodium concentration in the blood. That's got side effects the same as dehydration. Drinking too much water, not taking the salt, is hyponemia. It's the same as dehydration, but in reverse. Long distance marathon runners, bike riders can get hyponemia because they're always drinking but not replacing the salts. A cure for that is not to drink, just to rest, not drink, to increase that sodium level in the blood. But you can also eat salty foods and so forth. Now, having said all that, that's going off tangent a bit. But basically, two natural foods our bodies need. Now, they just happen to be demonised by the authorities, haven't they? Fancy that. The two things that are natural, that we've had for millions of years, are demonised by the authorities. Bad for you, demonised. All the experts and health authorities and the establishment science and all the nutritional experts and so forth, from the 1950s onwards, they developed the food pyramid, the food guidelines in the 1970s, came out I think in 1980 or the late 1970s, the first time the government in the nanny state, police state, told us what to eat and not what to eat. You know, the first time the government told you what to eat. You know, these two things are demonised. Okay, what happened after the food guidelines, the food pyramid came out? Obesity, heart disease and diabetes exploded in the 1980s because we stopped eating animal fats. So what are we going to have? We replaced it with sugar. Sugar is the #1 enemy of your health, not fats and salt. It's a myth and a lie they've pushed for 50 years now, and it continues to this day, because doctors will see high cholesterol and cut down on fried foods and fish and so forth because you've got high cholesterol. It's a total myth, like a zombie, you can't kill it. It's persisted to this very day. Now, there was a doctor that did, a scientist who did research in the 1960s and published a book in the early 1970s. Just forgot the name, I should have done a bit more research, but there was a doctor. He warned about sugar. He wrote a book and he was destroyed by the establishment. He was destroyed because the dogma, the official dogma, was salt and fat is bad for you. This doctor was destroyed. Fast forward to the 2010s, 30, 40 years, the last few years, where there's more doctors and scientists talking about, oh, it's actually sugar that's bad for you, not salt and fat. And one scientist didn't even know about that book. He was confronted and said, wow, I had no idea this scientist put out this book in the early 1970s, and he was destroyed. He probably died penniless and sacked from his job and everything. Okay, got off tangent again. So getting back on track, animal fats and salt, two natural foods. Now coming down here, sugar. And sugar's the main thing I wanted to talk about, but like I said, I've thrown in coffee, alcohol and tobacco, cigarettes, nicotine as bonus issues because they're all in the same category. With the exception of alcohol, okay, they're all drugs we don't need, first of all. They're all drugs we don't need. If every single person on planet Earth didn't eat another gram of these things, only one thing will happen: we would get healthier. You may have withdrawal symptoms and so forth because they're drugs, okay? They're drugs we don't need. They're bad for you, right? Dollar signs and RIP over here. They're multi-billion-dollar industries, all of them. Fancy that. Let's think about that for a moment. Let's talk about that. They're all multi-billion-dollar industries. Sugar, coffee, need I say alcohol, and cigarettes. Fancy that, they're all multi-billion-dollar industries, and there's hardly any health warnings against all those things. Except cigarettes, governments have made a half-assed attempt to control smoking, a few ads on TV, a few warnings on packets of cigarettes, and ban smoking from public areas. That's about it, because governments still earn millions and billions in taxes from tobacco and of course cigarettes and all these other things here. Money talks, corruption, big corporations getting rich and so forth. That's what it all is, and we're all fed all this. It's all, on TV, ads, it's part of the culture. Cigarette smoking was almost part of the culture. Alcohol is definitely part of the culture. If you don't go out and get drunk, if you don't pour a chemical, a deadly poison into your body and get drunk, you're almost considered weird. You're considered a wowser. Alcohol is a rocket fuel that launches rockets into space. Okay, coffee, need I say more? There's a Starbucks and a coffee shop on every street corner in the world now. And of course sugar. You go into supermarkets, you can buy big bags of sugar. You buy small things of salt, but massive bags of sugar. Even though it's a drug we don't need at all, and it's bad for you, it causes obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, 3 enormously bad diseases. You can buy massive bags of sugar in shops. Why is that? Really unusual, multi-billion-dollar industries. Governments don't, all the authorities and Department of Health and experts don't talk about these things, barely. And there's a half-assed attempt to control tobacco. Okay, so sugar, coffee and tobacco, those 3 things, with the exception of alcohol. Talk about alcohol. I've done a video about alcohol, so I might touch on it if I've got time here. They're all things from the New World. They're all plants from South and Central America. So we've only had those in our diet, except alcohol, for the past few hundred years. Animal fats and salt for millions of years. Fancy that, okay? But sugar, caffeine, cigarettes, tobacco, all from the New World. So they've grabbed these things from the New World. Businessmen, corporations and governments have traded this stuff to the New World from Europe. From there it's gone all over the world, and basically force-fed us those things and made multi-billion-dollar industries out of them, even though they're nothing. They're just drugs we don't need. But they were brought from the New World, and today they saturate the world. They may as well crop dusters with aeroplanes, sugar, alcohol, tobacco, and coffee. They may as well put it in our water. They already fluoridate our water, put a deadly poison in our water that we don't need against our will. Fluoridation, fluoride, a waste chemical of industry and the nuclear industry and so forth. They may as well put sugar, caffeine and nicotine even into our water. Cut out the middleman. That's virtually what's going on here. Little health warnings, they're all bad for you, they're all drugs we don't need, and they're all multi-billion-dollar industries. Really fancy that. It's just incredible how that works. But animal fats and salt, the 2 things that are natural, we've evolved with for millions of years, are what's demonized. Okay, this fallacy, this myth that they're bad for you, cause heart disease, that came from the 1950s. I think President Eisenhower in the 1950s had a heart attack. They measured his blood and found cholesterol in there. Oh, fats. The very word fats, the scientists said, well, fats must make you fat, must make heart disease. That was the reasoning behind the scientists. Then they did all their research, which reinforced their biased research, which reinforced that fats were no good. They researched countries they knew was low in heart disease, high in heart disease, I should say. So they skewed the research to reinforce their facts that fats were no good. Oh, fats must make you fat, must be bad for you, and salt. Okay, like I said, our body actually needs salt for metabolism. It needs salt. If you sweat out too much, you get hyponaemia. You can get hyponaemia, which is high sodium concentration, and you can get sick. Bad side effects like being dehydrated. Okay, and your metabolism needs salt. Fancy that. And animal fats, the good fats, there are some bad fats out there, trans fats, the deep fry oil and so forth, but the good fats, animal protein and so forth, is what's fueled mankind. We've evolved with it, developed with it, and it's built our modern civilization. And I've got that video ranting against vegetarians. I'm sorry I ranted there a bit, but basically it's essentially correct. There are some pros, to vegetarianism, but basically we've built our whole world on eating meat. It's not meat eaters destroying the world like the latest meme on Facebook is meat eaters are destroying the world. That's absolute rubbish. Our whole civilization's destroying the world. Okay, it's not meat eaters, so I just wanted to make those points. I hope I've made all my points, probably forgotten a few things. Alcohol was the odd one out there. I've spoken about that in a previous video. That's been with us for thousands of years, but the reason for alcohol was it was safe to drink, because water, you can drop dead from drinking water, but alcohol was safe to drink. So that's my theory as to why alcohol was drunk for thousands of years. But in the 20th century, again, businesses took over, and it's now become just a feel-good, good time thing, alcohol, when if you go back to the 19th century and for thousands of years, people drank alcohol, beer and wine simply because you didn't drop dead from it. It was like Russian roulette, drinking water. You can get sick, die and pick up all sorts of parasites. So, and of course caffeine may not have huge health costs that I'm aware of, but need I say more, it's a drug we don't need, multi-billion-dollar industry. And the last thing I want to point out was the fact that these things, sugar, caffeine and tobacco, all come from the New World, all come from plants. You can argue they're natural things. Well, they're almost not natural things. The plant kingdom, just because it comes from plants doesn't mean it's safe or natural, because the plant kingdom is the world's biggest chemical warfare factories. They've spent billions of years trying to kill animals and ward off animals to stop animals from eating plants. So they're chemical weapons factories. Plants can kill you. Garden plants in your backyard can kill you. Mushrooms can kill you. So, caffeine and nicotine, all drugs and poisons in high concentrations can kill you. And sugar is like cocaine. It's virtually a man-made product. You can argue that sugar is like, it's a man-made factory product, a crystalline substance that get out of sugarcane, just like cocaine, a crystalline substance that get out of coca plants. So just because these things come from plants doesn't make them fine or safe. Marijuana, hemp, heroin comes from poppy plants, cocaine comes from coca plants. You've got marijuana and sugar, caffeine and all that. Even chilies can be deadly as well. Chilies they make pepper spray from. So just wanted to make those points. I hope I've made all my points. This video has gone for long enough. I welcome your views and comments, and I'll see you next time.